You are watching DIY by Nikki Foster. Hey everyone, in today's video, I'm going to be making over my kitchen countertops so they can go from this to this. Over the last few months, I've been making over my kitchen. I already did the hardwood floors. I purchased this kitchen island. And before I had a YouTube channel, I had already painted the kitchen walls and the kitchen cabinets. Since the dining room is adjacent to the kitchen, I already completed that makeover too. And all those videos will be linked down below. This is a kitchen countertop paint kit. It says everything is inside, so I guess we'll have to see. Now, let's just see what's inside. The paint kit came with everything that it said it came with online. So it had the primer, gray veining paint, white highlight paint, 3 cans of epoxy resin, and 3 cans of epoxy activator, 1 roller arm, 1 standard rolling brush, 2 foam roller brushes, 2 angle paint brushes, 2-inch foam brush, a misting bottle, 2 drop cloths, 3 wooden stern sticks, gloves, a practice board, and a tiny detailed brush that they called an artist brush, and instructions. To be honest, I didn't really look at all the detailed components before buying. I just knew it came with the paint, epoxy, and a few brushes and the misting bottle. I was thoroughly surprised to see some of the extra items inside. This paint kit was very thought out, and it makes it easy for anyone to start a project right away if they have almost all of the items. So I already cleaned my counters, but this area had like a little bit of like grease from when I was cooking. So I'm just gonna clean that a little thoroughly. I'm just gonna clean that a little more thoroughly using this. We're not really supposed to use chemicals, but I don't really know what else to do. So I'm just gonna use this and just wash it again. The scouring side of the sponge roughs up the surface enough so you don't have to use sandpaper in order to get the primer to stick well. And now I'm just going to wash it with water. So I already cleaned my counters. I actually started this process a couple of days ago. I cleared off all the stuff that was on the counter. I wanted to make sure that I had everything super clean. So I used the scouring side of the sponge to scrub it all down. And I've been doing that for a couple of days because I wanted to make sure there was no extra grease or anything left, any residue or anything left under. And that's why I had to clean the other side over there, because I did fry something the other day and I'm like, you know what? I don't want it to be an issue when I get ready to paint that section. So let me just go ahead and do it a little thoroughly. But after I cleaned that with the crud cutter, I did rinse it with water a couple of times to make sure there was no leftover residue of any chemicals on there. So that's that. And so one more thing. So the kit does not come with a paint tray, but it does come with the drop cloths, which is awesome. So I can start taping that up, but it also doesn't come with any kind of tape or frog tape or anything like that. So you have to add that separately. So I actually have to go to the hardware store to get a paint tray so I can start priming. So we'll be right back. Quick stop over here at Home Depot. Right here, and I'm just going to get these 3 mini roller trays. Got the goods, and now with the power of my editing, I'm back home. Covering up the cabinets is really important. Sometimes I can be a little lazy with my prep, but when you're using epoxy, you don't want to play around because once it cures, it's really hard to get off. So make sure to use the drop cloth and cover up your cabinets. I tape mine using blue painter's tape, and I just let the bottom of the drop cloth pull right at the base of the cabinet. You might be tempted to cut it, but you don't need to because you'll need the extra coverage when it comes time for the epoxy. Also, remember that island I was telling you about that I purchased? Well, it's on casters and I love that. So I'm able to move it around really easily. So it definitely helped in situations like this. I also covered up the sink because it really wasn't worth trying to figure out how to take it out. I'm also trying to do stuff really easily. So this kit seemed easy enough to use with the sink intact. I do recommend carefully taping around the edge of the sink and cutting any areas around with an X-Acto knife so that you can prime, paint, and epoxy it exactly how it should be. This is how I did mine, and I used an X-Acto knife to cut right around the curved edge of the sink, and it worked perfectly. Next, I moved the stove out of the way a bit. You'll notice that I keep the stove nearby, and that's because I have a gas stove and the gas connection is still hooked up. I don't know how to remove gas, and I wasn't even going to. So if you have an electric stove, it might be easier for you to move the full stove out of the way. But if you have a gas stove, you definitely need to be careful like I did. Okay, so stove's out the way. I don't want to get paint like on the side of the stove, so I just decided to pull it out. Also, there's a little bit of like kind of like crumbs and stuff on the side of the cabinet, so I'm just gonna clean that real quick, and then I can finally get started. Since I'm painting the countertops, I decided to use the island as a station so it could just be a little bit easier for me. So to protect this surface, I'm using an extra garbage bag. For the first coat, I used the foam brush on the edges and on the connected backsplash of the countertop. It was hard to angle the roller brush on the edge of the countertop, so the foam brush worked really well. After I did a few parts of one section, I went in with the roller brush and painted the countertop surface. The instructions were thorough for this part, and the tip about continuing to paint and blend so that there were no lap lines made a lot of sense. This allowed for a smooth, even surface. Once I painted the first coat, I was low-key impressed by how just painting the countertop could really transform the kitchen. I don't know if I mentioned this before in any other video, but the original floors and the countertops were such eyesores in my kitchen. Both things, after they were changed, I was like wondering why didn't I do this sooner? And once the first coat dried for a bit, I went in again with the second coat using the same roller brush and foam brush. The countertops is looking pretty good. It's really bright in here because there's no like texture to the countertops. So it just looks like kind of stark with the white cabinets and then the white countertop. But I'm pretty sure that once I put the marble on there, it's going to like just elevate it so much more and brighten up the space too, because the brownish color countertops, they weren't my favorite. I never really liked them. I've always liked marble. So I'm glad I'm like doing this project to kind of get the look I want, but like on a budget. Anyway, I wanted to tell you guys how the countertop is looking so far with the second coat and like some tips that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so right here, you can see there's still a little bit of splotchiness here in the backsplash. Sorry, the lighting underneath the cabinet makes it cast a shadow, so it's not as bright as I would like. And then over here, I don't know if you guys can see it a little bit better, but see how there's like a little bit of spots that's kind of missing over here. So I am taking the foam brush and going over it again. The roller's a little too long for my cabinets and it's not giving me the finish I want. So I am going and using the foam brush. And I recommend that if that is what works for you, if you're going to try this project out, just as long as you get a nice, smooth, even coat, don't be afraid to use whatever tools that work for you. It was easier to remove the plastic from over the faucet and then paint behind it. The plastic just kept getting in the way. Originally, I thought the foam brush would work in this area too, but it didn't. I needed something more narrow, so I ended up using a smaller brush from a paint set that I had picked up from the craft store to get behind the sink. Okay, so today is day 2 of my kitchen countertop makeover. So a couple of things I wanted to tell you before we get into the next part. Although you could finish, like I guess like the first part of this in probably one day, I decided to just let it cure overnight because I needed to do a couple of coats, and I let the drying time really dry in between the 2 coats. I'm also like, I like to take my time just to make sure I'm not like making any mistakes or anything like that. So I'd rather make sure the full base of the countertop was fully painted and looking nice before I went on to the next step. So that's basically what happened. And then it just kind of got late. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'll just do the second part tomorrow. So now I'm going to be going on to the veining. So this is the gray veining, and I'm going to show you guys how I'm going to do it. First, I shook up the paint can really well. And once I opened it, I stirred it up again just to make sure everything was mixed up. One thing I noticed about myself is that when I'm doing projects, how many extra steps I take when I'm prepping. It's like I always want to make sure I'm doing everything right down to making sure I mix up the paint properly. Anyway, the set came with a practice board, and I honestly recommend trying this step out before moving on to painting on the actual counter, because it'll help you get familiar with the hand movement for the painting that you're going to be doing on the counter. And it dries pretty quickly, so I just wouldn't want to skip this step if I were you. The other thing is the counter and the practice sheet are so different with the finish, so it will look different. It just really helps with the drawing. When applying the gray veining paint, you're supposed to draw kind of like a line, but you're supposed to twist and turn the artist's brush as you're drawing to help create an edge look, and then mist with the water, and then take the 2-inch brush and dab along until finished. So here's my thought process on how I decided to draw the lines of my countertops. I decided to start with the smallest slab in the corner, closest to the fridge. That way, if I made any mistakes, it wouldn't be as noticeable because I usually keep my KitchenAid mixer on there anyway. And then after that was completed, I move on to the next part of my countertop near the stove. For this one, I had a reference picture on my phone for a countertop look that I liked, and I tried to mimic the design a little bit. I noticed that the marble look countertops that I liked the most had subtle lines and weren't overdone, so that's the look that I went for. My kitchen is on the smaller side, so I didn't want it to overdo it. I didn't want to overwhelm it. And for this whole project, the saying less is more is really key. Another thing that I did that I'm not sure I've seen anyone else really talk about is making the countertop and connected backsplash uniform. So you'll see in certain parts of the video, I'm drawing like a thin line upward onto the connected backsplash, and that's so I can make it look like it's lining up with the marble on the actual countertop surface. I also did this with the front edge of the countertop as well. I really wanted to give this DIY countertop that authentic marble look, and I did my best to copy actual marble countertops that I've seen online. I think adding the connected backsplash and front lip of the countertop was a key component in making this look so authentic. For the final part of the countertop project, we need epoxy. So the epoxy comes in 2 parts, epoxy resin and the epoxy activator. And I recommend saving the gloves for when using the epoxy. Epoxy is a very harsh and strong chemical until it hardens. It is not water soluble like paint, so definitely save the gloves for that part. So I'm taking the small can and pouring it right into the bigger can. This is exactly what the instructions say to do. So I'm mixing vigorously for 3 minutes, but I don't mix so hard that it's splattering all over the place. For this, you can set a timer or you can watch the clock like a hawk, like I did, because the timing has to be pretty precise. So for this part, I did pour the 3 lines onto the countertop like it suggested, but I didn't do the next part I'm about to explain. On the instructions, it says to take the brush and like brush it evenly over the countertop and then follow up with the foam roller brush. I didn't do that originally. I don't know why, but I guess I just like missed it and I was trying to work so fast that I forgot. So it says to do that, and then it'll help even everything out. It'll help have that really smooth coverage on the countertop, and that's what we're going for. So the epoxy is self-leveling, but you just want to work it until the counter is covered. And for the connected backsplash, I did use the brush and the 6-inch foam roller brush because in certain areas it was kind of hard to angle it. So the time allotted to work the whole countertop is about a half an hour. So for this part, I tried to move quickly, but efficiently. Also, one more thing that's important to note is that the epoxy will drip onto the drop cloth because it is self-leveling. And that is completely normal and you should expect it. Another thing that I did that I don't know if anyone else really talked about was around the sink. I did use the brush exclusively because, again, it was hard to like angle that 6-inch foam roller brush around the lip of the sink and like around the sink. So I did use the actual 2-inch brush, and then I tried to go over it with the foam brush lightly, and it worked out really well. So it looked nice and smooth in the end, and it looked really good. So here's just another angle of me showing you how I poured the epoxy onto the countertop. So I did the 3 lines, and then when I went in to use the foam roller brush, I worked it from every angle. So I did like the vertical lines, the horizontal lines. I really just wanted to make sure it was like a smooth, even surface and that the whole countertop was covered. So it's the next morning. The epoxy dried really well. I'm so happy with how it's turning out. I came downstairs still in my pajamas because I woke up and remembered I was supposed to take the painter's tape off about 2 hours after the epoxy was settled, and I basically went to bed. I forgot. So I'm just gonna try and take it off now. And for some of the tighter areas, I'm gonna try to use like an X-Acto knife, because now that it's like cured onto the countertop surface, it's gonna be really hard to just like pick it up. So yeah. If I'm being completely honest, removing the top part of the painter's tape from like where the subway tiles are on the wall was pretty simple in certain areas. But when it got to around the sink, it was so hard to get off. Like, I feel like in the video, I made it look pretty simple, but I kind of struggled removing it. So that's just one tip. Do not forget to take the painter's tape off. This was such a headache to remove after the fact because the epoxy cures so hard on it. It just was one of those things like, oh, dang, I wish I would have remembered to do it. So if you're in a predicament like me, you kind of need to like use the X-Acto knife to go through the epoxy layer a couple of times. I went through mine like once or twice depending on the area, so it can just have like a smooth, even peel to it, because I don't want to like make a mistake and have the epoxy come up. I waited 7 days for the countertop to cure before adding any decorative elements onto it. I was happy to get a few new things for the kitchen finally. I think I mentioned in a different video that I try not to buy anything for any project until I'm specifically working on that project. I just don't like clutter and things sitting around not being used, so it felt good to finally get a few new items for this space. And all the things that I'm talking about and mentioning, I am going to have linked in the description box below. And this is a reminder of what the kitchen looked like before with the brown countertop. And this is what it looks like now. I love how the marble countertop turned out. This project was pretty simple. The main part of it was just the drying time and the curing time for the epoxy. The new updated countertop really brightens up the space, and it really transformed the space too. I love it so much that I kind of wish I would have done this sooner. I do have all the links to all the items and the other videos I mentioned in the description box below. And if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comment box. All right, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any questions, make sure you comment in the comment box below. Don't forget to like this video and give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel, hit the little notification bell so you're notified anytime I post a new video. And also don't forget to follow me on Instagram. And I've been posting a little bit more on TikTok lately too, so make sure you follow me on TikTok. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. See ya. Peace. Okay.
You remember you gotta also post a video to TikTok.
Boo, I'm recording. Sorry. No, maybe I won't say that. Should I say that? All right, here we go. So thanks. Ugh. I totally forgot to, oh, hold on, I'm like blurred. I know what I'm gonna say. Why do I always stumble on my words? All right, let's do this one more time.